I would love for that. I would love for that theme song to be like 5 minutes long. It's only the whole thing is like 35 seconds.
Why would you want it to be 5 minutes?
Just so I could like cut and paste most of it. I could cut and paste different segments of it instead of having to take the same 3.
Who did your theme song?
Connor. Connor knows him.
Cool. Let's go.
On Facebook Watch. Okay. Here we go. Welcome back, everybody. This is Under Further Review. Again, Kata on vacation, so it's Andrew and producer Sarah here.
Hello.
In this segment, we have a little bit of, what I called it chicanery at the end of last segment to talk about between the Patriots and Chiefs. You brought this issue to my attention.
Yes, and it's not about the game itself.
Okay.
It's
because
not about...
believe me, I have many thoughts about the game itself.
I know you do.
Yes.
No, it's not about the 60 minutes of game time. It's about what happened right before, within 2 hours of game time before.
Okay.
About a little bit more. So.
Please do tell.
Okay.
Tell the listeners as well.
So last Sunday, the Kansas City Chiefs were going to play the New England Patriots in Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts. So obviously the Kansas City Chiefs were traveling for this. Well, they had a crate full of 35 of the players' bags accidentally be shipped to Newark, New Jersey, because of course it went to New Jersey. But then, without this gear, without their shoulder pads, their cleats, their jerseys, they were facing a possible forfeit, which means just because they didn't have the right uniforms, they wouldn't get to play the game. This might be a common rule for a lot of people. It had never really been brought to my attention before, and it really surprised me. Thankfully, in this instance, at 2:39, one of the CBS sideline reporters reported that the gear made it and it's here, and then they got to play the game.
Right. Which they ended up winning. 23-16.
Exactly. But I was really surprised that something that felt like it was no fault of their own could cause a forfeit, especially now that we're getting super deep in the season and it feels like everything's a little more high stakes. I know that every game really counts, so maybe that's not the case, but it's just feeling more and more like things are high stakes, especially against the Patriots. So yeah, I guess that just kind of appalled me a bit that there wasn't an alternative solution, that there was no talk of rescheduling, that there was no talk of, is there backup gear? Should stadiums have backup gear in case this happens? And what would that litigation look like? Would the Kansas City Chiefs have ended up suing the airline because they had to forfeit this high-stakes game? Or is this just one of those things where, well, the fine print says that sometimes we lose your stuff, and I'm sorry?
Well, okay, so let's back up.
Yeah.
So the NFL rule is that if you don't have all the equipment for all your players, for all 53 of your players, you can't play, and that's a forfeit.
Right.
I want to point out that the Chiefs plane went to Foxborough, like landed, not Foxborough, not an airport, but like it landed in New England, in either probably Providence because it's closer. Landed in Providence, Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. The stuff was unloaded from the plane, and they just kind of forgot to take a crate off the plane.
Right.
And then the plane left for Newark, New Jersey.
Right.
So the reason for this is because the Massachusetts high school football championships are played at Gillette Stadium on Saturday, and normally opposing teams will load in all of their equipment on Saturday, but because of all these games that were being played, they couldn't. So they were gonna have to load it in on Sunday morning. So that's why like all of that wasn't, I feel like it was kind of like a rush to get everything there, and then in this mad rush, they left one of the crates on the plane.
Sure, I guess that helps answer my question of how has this not happened before, and is it always this tight? I guess the answer is no, this turnaround isn't always this tight, but you hear about bags getting lost all the time.
Sure.
So that just makes it seem like this really high stakes thing could come down to, oh, this airplane already took off with all your stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you have tons of people looking out for all this equipment, you have an entire training staff, which is, the 53 players on the roster makes up about a quarter of your entire staff. Mm-hmm. So you have about 100 other people looking after this equipment. How does a crate get lost How do you not unload a crate off of an airplane? How do you not like go through a check and be like, okay, you know, the offensive line shoulder pads and helmets are here, but what about like the defensive line? What about their stuff? Where is it? Oh, it's on the plane. Let me go get it really quick so we don't have to forfeit the game.
That's true. I guess I'm imagining if you've ever lost a bag, there's like one tiny little office and you knock on the door and you're like, excuse me, and no one's in there and you're like, who's gonna help me? And then that plane is already beamed off to some other country and you're just like, well, I guess it's gone now.
And they make you fill out the form and they're like, you're like, can I have my bag? And they're like, no! And you're like, okay, fine. You know?
I guess I'm gonna go without any clothes.
Can I have like a voucher? And they're like, no! Airlines are dumb. But you were wondering before the show how often forfeits happen in the NFL.
Right.
Right? So I want your best guess.
I feel like they cannot happen that often.
You know what? You're right. They don't happen that often.
I would guess the last one happened like 30 years ago.
In fact, if the Chiefs had forfeited the game on Sunday against the Patriots, it would have been the first forfeit in NFL history.
Wow.
Would have been the first forfeit in NFL history. If a team forfeits a game, the team that forfeits loses the game by a score of 2-0. And the reason I say 2 is because 2 points is the number of points for a safety, and it's the max number of points a team can score neither by offense nor by defense, because you can get a safety, via a penalty as well.
Oh, that's really interesting, because
So,
that could figure into tiebreakers.
It's the only penalty that can be. It's the only points that can be assessed via penalty.
Okay.
So you're giving the other team a safety, and the team that didn't forfeit a 2-0 win. So it would have been the first forfeit in NFL history. There have been numerous cancellations of games throughout the years. Like they had player strikes back in the 70s and 80s. When JFK was assassinated in 1963, the AFL at the time canceled their league's games. After 9/11, the NFL pushed their entire schedule back a week to as cancellations for those games. And like certain on-field conditions. There was a preseason game a couple years ago. It didn't count. It was the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio, where they just canceled the game. But it was a preseason game, so it doesn't matter. Last year with the Chiefs and Rams in Mexico City, that big 54-51 game, it was originally supposed to be in Mexico City, and they moved it to LA because the field conditions were so bad.
Wow.
But you would think that like back in the 20s when the NFL was just a baby, and you had teams taking trains to games and things like that there would be more forfeits. It's, believe it or not, there weren't too many forfeits because the schedules were so fluid and they were just so like, people weren't really sure what to attribute forfeits to. So they just kind of canceled games because nobody really cared that much about pro football back in the 20s.
That's really interesting.
Right?
Well then, okay, here's my other question. Do you really think this forfeit would have happened? Or do you think they would have done something else? Do you think they would have maybe pushed it an hour with some of those, the 75% of other staff members, could they have found NFL regulation gear somewhere else just for maybe their starting lineup?
If you have to dress all 53 players, you can't just dress your starting lineup.
Really?
You have to have all 53 players in uniform.
Okay.
I believe if they knew that the equipment was on its way, I believe they would have delayed the game. I firmly believe that the NFL would have done everything in its power to avoid having to have one of its best teams and a team with the reigning NFL MVP forfeit a game to the Patriots.
That makes me feel a little bit better. But also then, would Kansas City have been penalized for the delay of game?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because I think you can blame it on the airplanes.
Okay.
You can blame it on the mix-up in the airport.
Yeah. Well, because the canceled games you were talking about, that affects both teams equally, right? It's not, none of them were canceled games because of one team or the other. They were all canceled mutually.
Yeah, I mean they were canceled for like, I don't know, because like a team didn't show up because their entire team got the flu or something like that, or because like they were shipped off to war or something like that, like bad weather, or because like everybody on the remember the segment about the Georgia Tech, the 222 game?
Yes.
Maybe you're like you have a lack of players and you only like 10 of your players are chased off the field by a wild dog, and so you can't field the correct number of players. So you have to not forfeit the game, but the game just gets canceled.
Right. Although I feel like your entire team getting the flu, it's like play through it, but your entire team getting shipped off to war.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Well, I mean, it wasn't until 1933 that a standardized schedule It wasn't until 1933 when a standardized schedule was instituted for everybody in the NFL.
Wow.
So they could cancel games without permission from the league and not be penalized for it.
It was also a smaller league then, right? It wasn't...
Well, it was smaller, but it was like more spread out and very much in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you didn't have these teams that are being run by, you know, that are worth billions and billions of dollars. All you had to do was put up $100 to field an NFL team back in the early days of the NFL.
And you weren't working towards a Super Bowl in the early days.
Right. I mean, you were still working toward a league championship, but it wasn't as prestigious as. Remember, the games weren't on TV or anything like that. There was, I mean, hardly any radio at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was really just a thing that people did as part of like sporting clubs for fun.
Right.
So it really had, the stakes were so much lower back in the early 20th century.
Right.
So I totally get why you know, forfeits and cancellations and things like that were more rampant back then.
Right. It wasn't like a forfeit with a capital F, like we're stamping your team with this and it's going to mean something for the future.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like, let's figure this out.
Yeah, I think this would have been a huge outrage for the NFL if this had happened. Yeah. As far as finding like NFL standard equipment, I'm not sure where you could go for that. I mean, you could probably go to any college and find equipment, but I don't know if it's up to NFL standards. My question is, like, you think that they would let them play with like college style pads or something like that? You know, as long as it fits, as long as you can field a team. I don't know where you're gonna find like NFL regulation helmets, because the regulations in college and the NFL are so different.
Well, here's another question too. What is the geographically closest NFL team to Gillette Stadium?
New York.
So could New York have, I don't know, could they have paid New York to borrow their equipment?
Well, the NFL headquarters are also in New York, so you're going to have a lot of things coming, a lot of merchandise or whatever coming out of there. I don't really think that matters, but, well, the Jets were playing on the same day.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't ship. I mean, the Jets finished their game at probably 4 o'clock Eastern time. You're not going to ship, 35 players worth of equipment to Foxborough and get it there by 4:30. It's just not going to happen.
You probably have more equipment than necessary. Maybe some old backup stuff. I don't know. I'm just wondering if anybody would have come together and sort of done a hodgepodge of equipment, and so you end up with this really funny calico team out there.
God, like I'm just imagining calico team. I'm imagining them in like tattered uniforms. You ever seen the movie The Longest Yard?
No.
Okay, so in The Longest Yard, do you know the premise of it? So it was a movie back in, I think, the 70s with Burt Reynolds, and it's about a team of prisoners who play football against the guards of the prison. It was remade in 2005 with Adam Sandler.
Okay, that's right.
And Chris Rock. And so I'm basically just imagining like these guys in uniforms that are like made of tape, and these and like they're like really like tattered and torn, like they're wearing like potato sacks.
Right.
And they have like the number on the front is like an X. Like,
well, and then imagine Kansas City beating the Patriots, and the Patriots are like, but those potato sacks made them more durable.
I'm so mad because you know what? That's exactly what would have happened.
Yeah, I know.
Is the potato sack guys are going to go out and they're going to beat the Patriots.
Yeah, and the Patriots are going to be like, but they were harder to tackle because they were really tough to grab at the potato sacks.
Potato sack guys, 23, New England Patriots, Super Bowl champions, 16.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's a movie. You're welcome, Hollywood.
Oh my God, can you imagine? That is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild. I mean, I imagine that the Chiefs probably could have fielded a starting lineup. I mean, it's only 11 people on the field, and if you have 35 players missing, that's, 35 players equipment missing, that's, you've probably got 20 or so left over. So you can field an offense and a defense with that. Be switching jerseys on the sidelines. Although from what I've seen, it's real difficult to like take jerseys off.
Oh, really?
They're like strapped in.
I guess that makes sense because they're like stretched over there.
Yeah.
But also, I thought you said everybody has to be in uniform, all 52 players.
Correct. I'm saying that you can have 11 players on offense and 11 players on defense out there in full Chiefs stuff, and then the other 22 guys on the sidelines in potato sacks. Yeah.
Yes. Regulation potato sacks.
Regulation potato sacks. NFL, we need to the PSL, the potato sack league, the PSFL, the potato sack football league.
Yes. Amazing.
Oh my goodness, that is wild. I was looking this up and I truly was shocked that there weren't any forfeits.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, let me just why is something going wrong? Anyways, I mean, they were canceled for all kinds of reasons back in the day.
Right.
They canceled because it was raining
Right.
or snowing. Keep in mind, these people were taking buses to games, and people didn't care as much about their well-beings. I don't know much about getting these players to the games.
Yeah.
Like now, it's like we need to play football on Sunday. We will play football on Sunday no matter what. And I think that statement rings true as of Sunday. They'll play football no matter what.
Yes, and in fact, that's actually one thing we're going to talk about a little bit later too, is how much I've discovered weather has an impact on games.
It was a bad weather game.
It was a bad
A team was losing, and then they weren't.
That was the series of NFL Greatest Moments. Was that correct?
Yeah, the greatest games or whatever. We were. I've been watching the NFL 100 Greatest series, and Sarah's been watching a couple with me, and we found that the 100 Greatest Games is made up of games that are like a team was losing, and then they weren't, or the weather was bad.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the gist for what makes a great NFL game.
Yeah, so every time now I'm watching a game and it starts snowing really hard, I'm like, is this going to be one of the greatest, next greatest 100 games or something?
Maybe so.
Yeah. Maybe the weather's just going to get that bad. It's going to make a list.
Absolutely. All right, great. With that said, you want to take a break?
Sure.
Cool. All right, let's pause for a moment. When we come back, Sarah's going to talk to you about what she's learned playing fantasy football, and just what she's learned about football since she and I became friends.
Yes.
So I'm surprised at how much of an impact I have on certain people. So stick around, and we will return in a moment. Audio clear.